We begin with breaking news from the White House. US President Donald Trump is threatening to increase tariffs on Canada again. Like everything else, Donald Trump wants cars and car parts to be made in the United States, so we'll effectively be charging a 25% tariff. But if you build your car in the United States, there is no tariff. In a stunning geopolitical shift, Ontario has officially severed US access to a multi-billion-dollar energy deal, and President Donald Trump is reportedly seething behind closed doors. The abrupt decision comes at a critical moment in the global race for clean energy supremacy, sending shockwaves through Washington and Wall Street alike. While the US scrambles to recalibrate its position, Europe has surged ahead, locking in a staggering $20 billion battery opportunity that analysts say could redefine the balance of power in the global energy market for decades to come. Insiders are calling Ontario's move a bold declaration of energy independence and a potential death knell for America's ambitions in the next-generation battery and EV sectors. This isn't just about contracts and commerce, it's about control over the future. Ontario's rejection of US involvement signals a broader realignment in international energy alliances, one that may leave the United States watching from the sidelines as other nations dictate the terms of the clean tech revolution. If this truly is the beginning of a new energy order, Ontario just drew the first line in the sand, and the world is watching. Before we begin, make sure to hit the like button. It helps us beat the YouTube algorithm. In one move, Canada's industrial heartland locked down its exports and diverted a $20 billion electric vehicle battery deal straight to Europe, cutting the United States out of a high-tech sector it once dominated. Washington was caught flat-footed. The White House offered no public response, but behind closed doors the shock was palpable. Hardliners warned this was only the beginning. Allies had become rivals. Clean tech fortunes were shifting across oceans. Factories in America's heartland braced for empty assembly lines starved of parts and power. Ontario cuts off US and Europe seizes $20 billion battery jackpot wasn't just a headline, it was a warning shot. Before we continue, make sure to hit the subscribe button to show your support, it really helps the channel grow. The chain reaction began with tariffs and retaliation. In early 2025, the US doubled import taxes on foreign steel and aluminum to 50%, hammering its closest trading partners. About a quarter of all steel used in the US is imported, one report noted, and Canada, the top supplier, was hit especially hard. President Donald Trump announced the hike at a Pennsylvania steel mill, bragging it would secure American jobs. He raised steel levies from 25% to 50%, deepening a global trade war. Canada's Chamber of Commerce blasted the move as antithetical to North American economic security, warning that unwinding integrated supply chains would come at a great cost to both countries. US allies around the world seized. Australia's trade minister called the tariff unjustified and not the act of a friend. The European Union vowed countermeasures. But Canada's response went beyond words. Ontario turned its own economic arsenal against the United States. On March 10, Ontario imposed a shocking 25% surcharge on all electricity exports to the US, a move without modern precedent. Power lines that had quietly sent cheap energy south for decades became bargaining chips stretched across the border. The new fee, about $7 per megawatt hour, would add up to $277,000 in daily costs for American consumers, roughly an extra $69 per month on the electric bills of 1.5 million US homes and businesses. Ontario Premier Doug Ford was unapologetic. President Trump's tariffs are a disaster for the US economy. They're making life more expensive for American families and businesses, Ford declared. Until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario won't back down. We'll use every tool in our toolkit. He had already told US media that Trump's trade war was causing mass chaos and warned he would hit back unless the US retreated. Now Ford delivered on that threat. The province's power grid, a lifeline supplying upstate New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, became leverage. Ontario officials coolly noted they could hike the surcharge further or even cut off the flow if Washington continued its economic aggression. The message was clear: the interdependent energy trade that kept American lights on could no longer be taken for granted. The economic pain was immediate and strategic. Ontario's grid had exported roughly 12 million megawatt-hours to the US in the previous year. Suddenly, that lifeline carried a punitive price. New York's governor and its senior US senator blasted Trump's energy tariffs as dangerously short-sighted, noting the policy was so poorly written that nobody even knew if it legally applied to electricity. Ontario's surcharge forced the issue. US utilities would have to pay regardless. The Michigan Public Service Commission publicly fretted about pricing and reliability concerns from Ontario's move. While most of Michigan's power is generated or contracted in-state, officials admitted the tariffs and counter-tariffs could roil regional energy markets. They even contemplated slapping Trump tariff stickers on customer bills to make the cost of the trade war explicit. Grid monitors in New England warned that import duties on Canadian electricity would drive up prices and disrupt flows, calling for urgent clarity. But clarity was not coming. Instead, Ontario had delivered an ultimatum underpinned by physics: if the US wanted to weaponize trade, Canada could flick a switch and dim an American city. We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans and in parallel preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed, Prime Minister Mark Carney told Parliament, underscoring that Canada would not blink first. Then came the $20 billion shock that truly rattled Washington. After years of planning an electric vehicle battery megafactory in Ontario, Germany's Volkswagen sealed the deal with Canada, and not one battery from that plant would be bound for the United States. The St. Thomas, Ontario Gigafactory, covering 370 acres, will pump out up to 1 million EV batteries per year. It's the largest single investment in Canadian automotive history. Europe's biggest automaker chose Ontario over US sites, lured by rich subsidies and access to Canadian critical minerals. Together, VW and Canada's government put a $20 billion price tag on the project. Ontario's leaders beamed at the groundbreaking ceremony. They had beaten hundreds of other jurisdictions to win this prize. But behind the celebration was a strategic realignment. Every battery made in Ontario is now slated for Volkswagen's electric cars in Europe, not America. What was envisioned as a North American supply chain has, in the span of months, become a transatlantic one. Not a single cell from Ontario's battery belt will power an American-built car. US auto plants, already reeling from parts shortages, suddenly face the prospect that their top allies' new production will bypass them entirely. The scale of the shift is tectonic. In Windsor, just across the river from Detroit, another EV battery plant backed by Europe is rising, a joint venture of Stellantis and South Korea's LG Energy. It's part of an EV battery supply chain in Canada that global automakers are rapidly building up. European firms are pouring money into Canadian clean tech. Chemicals giant BASF of Germany secured land in Quebec for a battery materials factory. A Norwegian company, Vianode, struck a deal to supply GM with critical battery minerals and is exploring building a factory in Canada. Investment is flooding in from Amsterdam to Oslo, drawn by Canada's lithium, nickel, and cobalt reserves, and by a political climate far more predictable than Trump's America. Even Japan has taken note. In British Columbia, officials caught Asian battery makers and hydrogen fuel projects, sensing opportunity as US relations fray. Canada is aggressively redesigning supply chains that for a century pointed south. Now Ontario's factories are retooled to meet European Union standards. Products are being engineered to comply with EU regulations on everything from digital data to EV chargers. The historic pull of the US market is being eclipsed by a strategy of diversification at any cost. No sector is off limits in this confrontation, not even defense. In Ottawa, the new Canadian government delivered another jolt, a freeze on its planned purchase of 88 American F-35 fighter jets. The $19 billion deal for Lockheed Martin stealth warplanes, the cornerstone of Canada's air defense modernization, was suddenly in doubt. Prime Minister Mark Carney, only days in office, ordered a top-down review of whether the US-made jets are the best investment for Canada given the changed environment.